Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Jo and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am a professional theatre critic, as you can clearly tell, and I was recently invited to go and see Unfortunate, the untold story of Ursula the Sea Witch, which is a musical that has just begun its run at the newest Southwark Playhouse venue in Elephant and Castle, the aptly named Southwark Playhouse Elephant. So I, a critic in this moment dressed as a mouse, went to a theatre named after an elephant to see a show about an octopus. It's like Dr. Dolittle up in here today. For clarity, I do not always dress like this when I am reviewing theatre productions, but my fiancé and I own a lot of these and it felt appropriate for today's video, so why not? So, this show, Unfortunate, the untold story of Ursula the Sea Witch, is a musical parody. This is not an official Disney musical, as becomes very clear when you begin to see the show. In fact, it began its life as a fringe musical from the theatre company Fat Rascal. Now, the first show of theirs I ever saw was at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2018, and it was a musical called Wolverine, which spoofed the superhero complex with this feminist female superhero, and then the following year when I went back to the Fringe, I was very excited to see that they were working on what was then a brand new version of this show. It was literally in a university lecture theatre. They had a couple of set pieces. They had a very small cast. It was a one-act version of this show that has now grown to two, but it went down very well that summer. In fact, it earned them a spot in one of the larger underbelly venues, the iconic upside-down inflatable purple cow where Six played at the Edinburgh Fringe, and it was due to play there in the summer of 2020, which of course did not happen. The festival did not go ahead because the world was busy ending. However, the next time we got a full Edinburgh Fringe, Unfortunate did indeed play at that venue, and I saw it there as well, making this the third time that I have seen the show. This is the third and most substantially different and evolved iteration of it that I have seen, and I'm going to be telling you all about it today. What is this show about? What can audiences expect? Critically, what type of audiences do I think would enjoy this show? Is this a Disney show for kids? Spoiler alert, it's not. All will be discussed in today's brand new video review. If you enjoy this one and would like to see more of my video reviews here on YouTube, you can check out many more on my channel, and you can subscribe while you're there because I have many more videos coming very soon and very exciting plans going into 2024. You can also find me on other social media platforms. I am MickeyJoTheatre on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and the app formerly known as Twitter. For now though, let's get our tentacles really wrapped around this one and talk about Unfortunate, the untold story of Ursula the Sea Witch. So while I assume it's obvious, I'm going to tell you anyway that this is a musical parody of The Little Mermaid, and it takes this idea that obviously began with Wicked, which was based on the Gregory Maguire novel that explored the backstory of the misunderstood Wicked Witch of the West from L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Gregory Maguire took Baum's villain and then gave her a backstory, and didn't necessarily argue that she was a heroine. I mean, I've not read the book, I've only seen the musical, but what it does is explains why her behaviour was understandable and the motivations that led towards her making the decisions that she did in the other story. Star Kid then did a take on this, sort of in an homage to Wicked. They did Twisted, which was the backstory of Jafar. That, I think, was very much the precursor to this, and you can see in the way that they title this show as well. Unfortunate, of course, pays tribute to the iconic villain song Poor Unfortunate Souls, but it is also, just like those other shows, an adjective title. Wicked, like the Wicked Witch of the West. Twisted, a parody of that for Jafar, and Unfortunate for Ursula. But like those other shows before it, this one centres around the previous story's antagonist, and this is all about Ursula the Sea Witch. And much like Wicked, it begins at the moment of her death, and then we travel backwards in time. We see her as an adolescent octo-woman in the city of Atlantica, where she meets a young then Prince Triton. Now, it retcons what has become the narrative in the stage version of Little Mermaid and the live-action version of The Little Mermaid, where Triton and Ursula are canonically siblings. They are very much not siblings here, and they go out of their way to point out that that is not the case, because they are actually love interests. But they are love interests of different species, from different sides of the sea, I guess. And so, much like Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, theirs is a forbidden love, only with tentacles. A little like West Side Story, except nobody can hear you finger snapping underwater and the choreography would take a lot longer because of the resistance. Now, this romantic backstory between Ursula and Triton was always a big feature of this show. It's a key component of Ursula's backstory and what motivates her as this vengeful character that she comes to be. The show very much retains her traits from the original Little Mermaid movie, but sort of recharacterizes her in a way that we would now understand to be positive, given a modern perspective. You know, she's sex positive, she's, I guess, bisexual. She's also body positive and doesn't shy away from talking about her size. And she's deliberately feminist, having been raised herself by a strong female octopus. But the backstory and the youth in Atlantica is much more fully explored in this version of the show. There are a few more side characters, we have a larger cast in this production, which is something that I really wanted for the show the last time I saw it, because there was just a little bit too much chaos with people quickly changing between different characters and having to enter late as a result of that. Eventually, however, we arrive at this familiar plot, where Ariel comes to ask Ursula for the ability to go and be a human, and go and walk on land with legs rather than a tail, having fallen madly in love with a sailor she's met exactly once and had no real conversation with. Oh, to be young and half a fish. Now, the key difference here is in The Little Mermaid, this was all Ariel's own doing, but Unfortunate suggests that Triton has actually returned to Ursula and grovelled for forgiveness so he can enlist her in helping turn Ariel into a more capable ruler ready to ascend the throne, because inexplicably she is now the sole heir to the throne, even though she's the youngest of like 8 mermaid sisters. But unfortunately, in the Love Island, Kardashian and social media age, Ariel, though underwater, is a little bit of an airhead. So the decision to grant Ariel her wish and let her spend a few days up on land, albeit with the lack of her voice, is actually a scheme perpetrated by her father Triton and Ursula, which puts an interesting spin on it, because what Ursula is hoping for is that Ariel will come to understand the importance and the power of her voice as a young woman, and how that's more important than giving everything up for the love of a man who you don't really know. Now, the rest of the show plays out with a distinct familiarity, albeit with a little bit of a comic twist. The only other big difference is the chef from the animated film The Little Mermaid is transplanted here with the character of Colette from Ratatouille, which I noticed well before they dropped the heavy Ratatouille reference in the start of the second act, simply because Ali, who was playing this character, has the short, but it's just like so visually familiar of Colette from Ratatouille that I was like, are they actually adding another separate character into this show? And they were, for reasons that become apparent by the end. But for now, I am not going to tell you what those were, because that is all of the plot synopsis I am going to give you. I want to start talking about what I thought about this show. So here are my thoughts. Now, as a Disney fan and as a musical theatre person, I enjoy this show a lot. I have always enjoyed this show. When it was a little musical at the Edinburgh Fringe, it showed extraordinary promise and had such really smart material. When it got expanded a little bit and it played to a slightly bigger space and they added more material in, I thought it was just slightly beginning to lose its way, and I was very optimistic that this really fleshed out version would manage to reconnect to that original promise. And I'm not entirely sure that it has. What happens when you double a musical's running time and you add in a bunch more songs and you add in more characters is it can either feel purposeful or it can start to feel a little bit bloated. But that isn't actually what I think this show's key problem is, because it does have this really strong concept. Like, the idea behind this is such a great idea, and the way that it links to what they want to talk about with feminism and re-examining hugely popular media by a 21st century standard, that all works really well, and it's just a really strong concept for the show. But the main issue for me at this point is the humour has two different styles throughout the show and feels at odds with itself. On the one hand, you have the smart, sophisticated humour that has been present since the beginning. In so many of this show's lyrics, there are some really sophisticated jokes that unfortunately aren't necessarily landing, often because they're unintelligible. Take Ursula's material as an example of this. There are many songs which use a lot of rap or really fast singing at the very least. The song Unfortunate, which is more of a sort of a club remix disco number, which I enjoy very much. I think it's a really strong song, and they were smart to do something that moves completely away from Poor Unfortunate Souls, because you can't write a better but similar version of Poor Unfortunate Souls. You're better to just deviate completely. The issue is the lyrics are so fast that unless they are delivered with extreme clarity, they are difficult to hear, and it's difficult to land a joke. I also think the way that the lyrics fall onto the rhythm of the song isn't necessarily done for hugely comedic effect. It's one thing to write funny words and put them to music, it's another thing to write a comedy song, because comedy is about rhythm and is about delivery, and if the music doesn't have the right comedic rhythm, then the joke will fall flat. Sometimes this is understood, and Ursula has this one section where she sings, "You'll have your looks, your pretty face, and don't forget the importance of visual communication," which is a parody of the Disney version, "Don't forget the importance of body language." But this segues immediately into a little bit of music. There isn't really the space and the capacity for the audience to laugh at this. It's also way too fast. Like, the audience can hear it, but processing it is another thing altogether. Comedy aside, there are also moments where there are just far too many lyrics to even scan with the music. There's a moment where Ursula tries to sing, but there's more to this transition than meets the eye, and that it simply doesn't fit in the lines. But there's more to this transition than meets the eye. It's so very fast, and unless you have a really capable performer, I saw one of the writers, Robin Grant, play this role the first 2 times I saw this show. Now, while she has been moving away from playing the role herself, she remains close to the show as one of its writers and its director. But she had the ability to deliver this music with enough precision and clarity that you got the lines and you got the jokes. And I haven't felt the same way about either of her successors in the role. Another line that misses its joke at the beginning of the show, it's in the song Nasty. Ursula sings, "If a man had made the deal like the Mermaid Girl and me, would you cast him as the villain? No, he'd get an OBE." And the way the melody rises on, "No, he'd get an OBE," it's just this continuation. It gives you the sense of, I'm not done with this sentence because I'm going into the next part of the song, and then it goes into the next part of the song, but it's not good for comedy. What I think is the funniest song in this score is a song called "We Didn't Make It to Disney." And now I love the way that the staging of this has evolved, because they have all of these terrifying looking aquatic puppets. It's a song all about the creatures from the dark waters who were not in the Disney film because they weren't considered attractive enough, but it's nodding to the criticisms of Disney that they tend to prefer casting white, able-bodied, heteronormative characters, and that those are the stories that they reflect, which is not true all of the time, as we know, and things are evolving, but I think a lot of the criticisms, at least in the sense of poking fun, are still valid. And yet they have pulled back a little bit on some of these lyrics. They still have lines in there like, "Maybe I should not disclose the fact that I'm a Jew," and "I have a regional accent but I'm not poor." The line, "We can't be screened in Texas because we're gay," has now been changed to China, which, you know, is true. Now, I believe that this song has the capacity to be a standout moment within the show. It doesn't really refer to anything else within the plot, but it's just a fun Disney parody song. It sounds a little bit musically like It's a Small World after all. It makes references to the Disney parks. I do think they've cut the line "There up above in the soft and flattering light, everybody's simply stunning, everybody's thin and white," something like that. The problem I think it now has is with the cast's delivery. And this is a very talented cast, but they are over-singing these lines and over-delivering them. There's something to be said when you have a quick, witty lyric. There's something to be said for just scaling back your vocal delivery just so it can be heard. If you try and over-perform it and over-express and animate and deliver and over-sing that line, we're not going to understand it with clarity. We need to just hear these lyrics delivered simply. Think of Victoria Wood as a great example of this, as a writer of witty comedy songs. The vocal delivery is very simple. It's not over-sung with a tremendous amount of expression or vibrato. It's half speak singing, but it allows the wit and the cleverness of that joke in the lyric to be the queen of that moment, to be the most important thing and to actually be heard. So I'm sinking down a rabbit hole here, but that was the one comedy style I was telling you about, which is actually very witty and sophisticated. It's just not landing well. The other is this thing that they have been adding in over the course of the show's development, where they've just been putting in more sexual references and smut and lowbrow humour, which I'm not against. It can work. It just starts to feel a little bit more like an adult pantomime and less like a fun show for people who watched Disney during their childhood and are now going to enjoy laughing at the silliness of it all. Because those moments also don't get a laugh because they're a little bit unexpected and just a little bit odd. Ursula has a lot of lines of dialogue where she talks about having performed various graphic sex acts with members of the audience. During the second act, she says something to the effect of, "Sorry, I'm late. I was just doing whatever with half of the second row," and then points to them. And it's just weird. It's not particularly funny, and it is just weird. And I think maybe it's just one character detail too many, like for her to be so vocally sex positive the entire time. I get how you can extrapolate that from her animated character, but I think it would probably be more effective to just play on the feminism of it all, how she is this like canny businesswoman, and also the body positivity thing, for her to be a proudly plus-size villain and kind of the antithesis of these thin mermaids. It's like with Elphaba, there is a character who has heart and who has, I don't want to say brains and courage, and who has depth, but really the main focal points of her character are the whole animal rights and advocacy thing and the insecurity about the green complexion and kind of like the secret desires that live beneath that she doesn't really want to share. But those are the two driving points of that character. I think for Ursula, all you really need is the feminism, the body positivity, and the vengeance and the resentment that has come out of her experiences when she was younger, when she was falling in love, but when the Atlantican society rejected her. As is becoming clear, I have many more thoughts about this show. Let me tell you next up all of the things that I enjoyed about it and have historically enjoyed about it. So I do love the cleverness with which this has been written, which is why it's frustrating that the humour isn't always landing. I love the song in the second act that is so close to Kiss the Girl, but it just twists it just enough to be a fun parody, and it's called Ask the Girl, and the whole point is it's framing it as a reminder of the importance of consent, and so the lyric becomes, make sure to ask before you kiss the girl, which I think is so clever and so funny and a good point. Then there is Ariel's song in the first act. Now, Part of Your World is perhaps the greatest I Want song ever written. Like, Howard Ashman and Alan Menken knocked it out of the park with this one. It's at least the best Disney I Want song I think there has ever been, maybe alongside Out There. It's a really tricky conversation, but what they have done with it here is genius. It is simply genius. I was screaming with laughter the first time I heard this, and when they came to record a few of the show's tracks, they smartly left this one off so they could keep it as a surprise. Ariel has this statue, familiar of the statue in her grotto in the film, and she pulls this cloth off to reveal a very large and prominent male appendage, because the song is called I Want to Be Where the Boys with are. Talking about how the mermen she lives amongst and all of the other fish creatures are inherently disappointing, and that is what she longs for in the world up above. And her characterization follows that, like she has this kind of a Love Island, The Only Way is Essex accent. We also get a reprise of that song, just like we have the iconic Part of Your World reprise. This comes amongst a sequence where they are actually flying the cast around, which in this small off-West End venue is so impressive. I didn't know they had the capabilities for that kind of thing at Southwark Playhouse Elephant, but my goodness. And I will say, the way that they fly them around to make it look like they are swimming and falling off of ships is far more visually impressive and looks so much more like actually being underwater than the damn Heelys that they used to skate around the stage in the original Broadway production of The Little Mermaid. Like, to do that in this size of a space is a triumph, an absolute triumph. I was very impressed by that. Kudos to John Maddox for Suspended Illusions. I will also say Abby Clark may have been the MVP of this creative team for me for the set, costume and puppet designs, because all three of those things I loved separately and I loved them all together. It was fantastic. The puppet designs were hilarious and characterful, the costumes were brilliant, and the split level set that manages to conjure both a sailing ship and the human world, as well as these underwater grotto locations. A very smart, very adaptable playing space. There are also some clever little details. We have some grave headstones that get pulled up from the floor during the second act that have these hilarious little Disney inside jokes from other films on them, referencing characters from Aladdin and The Lion King. So funny. And the one other song I want to mention is the song To Be King, because this always gets a big reaction, and it has a little bit of visual humour and a little bit of wit in the lyrics, but by and large it's not the most laugh-out-loud comedy song in the show. It's a lot more heartfelt and sincere. This is a moment of realisation for Triton, who is coming to terms with wrong decisions made in his past and connecting to what it is that his heart really wants, but it's also a big sing for the actor playing the role. And I think at this point the audience responds to what is just a solid moment in musical theatre, and that's a good lesson for this show. It's like in a show like Avenue Q, you have a song like There's a Fine, Fine Line, which does nothing comedic. It's just a heartfelt, big musical theatre ballad. We don't need every single song to be riotously funny throughout. You can make space for those moments of sincerity. I almost think it then becomes a little bit conspicuous that Ursula doesn't have her wicked style I'm not that girl moment. Like, we see her vulnerability and we experience it in the script, but she doesn't really have a lot of capacity for that in the music. We see softness from her when she has romantic duets, but we don't see that moment of despair. I think that would be useful. Finally, a really dumb joke that I enjoy immensely every single time, and I'm not going to spoil too much for you, but Kirsty, the sea cucumber princess, it's just the most madly conceived character. It's literally a cucumber, and the entire arc that Kirsty has in the show and the late Act 2 significance. It's beautiful. It's just utterly bonkers, but just wonderful. Returning to some other issues that I had with the show, I did say it felt bloated. There are a lot of songs that are too long or simply don't need to exist. I like the Ratatouille reference that we have at the top of the second act in the song Les Poissons, and the way that this is staged with Ali Dark-Munro transforming between playing the chef and playing Sebastian via a switch of hats and popping in and out of these food preparation containers while working on like the preparation stage. It's so well staged. The transformations between characters are so slick. However, I wonder how it plays from the sides. And the same with those gravestones that I mentioned. I wonder how legible the writing is from the sides, because this is a space that plays to the audience on 3 different sides of the auditorium, and it largely felt like it was directed for the people sat in front, with not much regard for the audiences on the sides. But what I was going to say originally about that number is I don't think it needs to exist. I like the joke, I don't like the song. My least favourite song in this might be Female Role Models. They have been trying to make this work since the beginning. They have updated the rap section in the middle to add a joke kind of referencing the Ariana DeBose, Angela Bassett did the thing. It's just another rap section where the lyrics are too fast and the delivery is too expressive and animated for any of it to be heard. And inherently it does just offend my ears a little bit, the way that the lyric falls onto the melody with the scansion of "this is what comes from a lack of female role models," like Sondheim is turning in his grave at that scansion. That's terrible. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot to mention this as well. Act 2 opens with a song called Scuttle's Shot, which is referencing a very recent Little Mermaid idea because it's parodying the song that Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote for Scuttle for the live-action version, Scuttlebutt. But this is basically the only time that we see Scuttle in the show, and it's parodying all things Lin-Manuel Miranda with a Lin-Manuel Miranda style voice. And that didn't land either, really, at the performance that I was at, because it just didn't have a strong enough punchline. And honestly, I think this octopus is just overbaked. I think Robin Grant is hilarious. I think Daniel Fox, who has co-written this, is hilarious. I think they're both very, very funny people with a great sense of humour, with a sophisticated and a witty sense of humour. I think they should stick to that and focus on prioritising getting those jokes to land rather than trying to add in different humour styles everywhere else and trying to go for shock value and trying to go for risque and trying to go for lowbrow. Because if half of these jokes landed well, it would be twice as funny. So Shauna Hammock is playing Ursula, and I think she gets a lot of this right. She has the Ursula look, she gets the voice right. We have this kind of a Pat Carroll-esque Ursula voice. She delivers all of this material with conviction and with commitment. I think because the Ursula characterization is a little bit all over the place, it's a difficult one to pitch. She also struggles with the faster rap sections of the score. I think she's actually got a lovely voice that we didn't really get to hear to its full potential during this show. Thomas Lowe plays Triton. He has a lovely voice that we do get to hear during the song To Be King, and I enjoy that in this production they have focused more on young Triton and giving him a discernibly different personality, so he isn't just the same ruler the entire time, so that adolescent Triton is more like poetic and, you know, isn't necessarily ready himself to be king. We then see some of that later on in Ariel. I also really love the chemistry between these two performers, between Thomas and Shauna as Triton and Ursula. They have a couple of great power ballad duet moments. Then we have River Medway as Ariel. Now this is the first time that a drag performer has been cast in this role, and it does kind of feel a little bit like a hat on a hat in theory, because you can make a joke out of Ariel arriving on stage and looking like a very traditional Disney version of Ariel, and then speaking with this The Only Way is Essex voice and clearly being a more vapid, self-involved version of Ariel than the one that we recognize and expect. But when you have a drag performer in drag playing that role, then it does just start to feel like a drag parody, and that's where the joke is coming from. And yet I think River Medway did a great job of landing the Ariel humour, of landing this slightly airheaded personality. In particular, the moments in the second act where she's lost her voice and she's trying to express herself, very, very funny. I also want to talk about Julie and Capulet. Now they play Grimsby, but they also play Vanessa. Now this is when Ursula in the second act drinks a potion, magics herself into a beautiful glamorous woman, uses Ariel's voice to go and win the affections of Prince Eric in order to stop the wedding between Eric and Ariel. What we lack here is we don't really get a closeness of the two voices. In previous versions of the show, there's been a real moment where the performer who's playing Vanessa transitions from a version of the Ursula voice to something more sounding like Ariel, because Ursula is using Ariel's stolen voice. But that does bring me to the two MVPs of this cast. We have Ali Dart, who is credited as playing Sebastian, but plays many more roles throughout this show. The multi-rolling is slick, the characterization is on point, and being one of the original company members of Fat Rascal Theatre, who has been with this show since the beginning, Ali understands the comedy tone, and that goes a really long way in this show. There is a reason why the Sebastian scenes and why Ali's other scenes land as well as they do. It's because Ali gets what it is that they are trying to deliver, that the comedy is more important than the musical theatre vocal, that the characterization is key. And then finally, Jamie Mawson is just about the best thing on that stage. Again, he's been with this show for a very long time with Fat Rascal, and he wins the day by just giving us these brilliantly charismatic characterizations. He plays Prince Eric, he also plays Triton's father, Neptune. I think he's King Neptune. Neptune is this slightly ruthless and emotionally unavailable ruler who he plays a little bit like Dumbledore and Gandalf-esque as this wizened older man, merman, I guess, with an enormous beard. And then when he's playing Prince Eric, it's very like Eton schoolboy, slightly young Prince Charles-esque, but obnoxious and self-involved and whiny. It's just great. So who do I think would enjoy this show? I think the target audience for this and the people who really ought to connect to it are the people who saw The Little Mermaid years ago, who had it on DVD, who had it on VHS, who had it recorded off of the Disney Channel on TV, and have that fondness and that familiarity with the film, and who maybe went back to go and see the live action version recently because of that nostalgia, but will also appreciate the send-up of it all. If you're very precious about all things Disney and you don't want to go and see something that takes the piss just a little bit, then you probably shouldn't go and see this show. But if you're anything less precious about it, then I think most Disney fans will probably really enjoy this. Or people who had a more casual relationship to Disney but will be nostalgic about it. If you're any kind of a Star Kid fan, this is trying to do the same thing. It's somewhere between a Star Kid show and a Saturday Night Live parody sketch. It is funny, it shoots at a lot of current topical references, they don't all score, but I think there isn't that much, especially on stage, which caters to nostalgia for this generation. So go and see this show, go and have a great time, take your friends, and hopefully you'll have a lot of laughs. But those have been my thoughts about Unfortunate, the untold story of Ursula the Sea Witch. It is going to be touring the country after its run at Southwark Playhouse. Go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more videos coming very soon. Make sure to comment down below. Let us know if you have seen Unfortunate. Have you seen it in this current run? Did you see it previously at the Edinburgh Fringe? It's played in London before, in other venues. It's also toured around a little bit. Let us know in the comments. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm MickeyJoTheatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!